So it seems like an important element to like being able to find joy in playing bagpipes and like enjoy your piping, as Gary West might say, is to settle into, accept, and even embrace that it's a
Yes.
process and it's a forever process. You're always going to be adjusting
Right.
things, and that's what's fun
Well, and
about it.
you're always making adjustments. And so it's not about learning to do a bunch of things, right? It's
Mm.
about developing, it's about developing a rich set of knobs. I'm known for taking long showers, and it's where I do my best thinking. So the other day I was in the shower. The other day I was in the shower, and I was just thinking to myself, it's all about knobs, really, isn't it? So anyway, I was in the shower. I was thinking about knobs. It's all about knobs. Let me explain to you. Let me explain to you where I'm coming
No
from.
explanation necessary. We all
Let me
get it.
explain to you where I'm coming from with this. It's really when it comes to like, I was thinking about like how you would make a medley or how you would make a good composition or something like that. But a lot of the times when we're working on a medley, I'm thinking about knobs, Jim. Now, hold on. Let me explain. Let's pretend you're in a Soviet era lab.
Your pipe major is listening right now, like, what?
They're not surprised. Okay. So let's say you're in a Soviet era lab, right? And you're operating a Soviet laser beam. Okay.
Yeah.
And the objective is to get the laser beam as strong as it can possibly get. You can
Sure.
destroy the enemy or blow up the moon or something, right? And picture yourself at a console, and the console has a whole bunch of different knobs on it. And your job is to find the ideal adjustment of these knobs to maximize the output of the laser beam. Okay. The problem is we're not always sure exactly how they're going to interact. You might adjust one knob, and while that aspect increases, but the overall output of the laser for some reason drops. But if you do enough trial and error with the different knobs, you might find that like a certain configuration results in an extremely strong laser beam.
Yeah,
Are
that
you, are
makes
you
sense.
following my
Yep, I'm
like? Are you
following
following
you.
my mental
Yep.
image here? And
Yeah.
then I was thinking of like, okay, so you picture that and creating a medley or a concert. A concert would be another good one. Or when you're producing some sort of composition or doing some sort of artistic endeavor, it's all about having a wide variety of knobs at your disposal to play with. And then it's about optimizing the configuration of those knobs. Cool.
Yeah.
So when we
Okay. Yep.
learn the bagpipes, there's a lot of different knobs to develop.
We learned that quickly. Yes,
Right. So like
absolutely.
one of the knobs we all know and love is the tempo knob. Right. Jim,
Yeah. Yeah,
what
we
is
all
so
know and
funny?
love that knob. That's for sure.
What's so funny?
Yeah.
Pay attention. So like, but in
Yep.
all seriousness now, Jim, the tempo knob is like, I want to give this thing full tempo. Bam, slam it. That's one of
Yeah.
the knobs we could play with. One of the knobs we could twist on.
But sometimes like already I'm like, hang on a sec. Sometimes we might initially think and crank it as far as you can go. That's the ideal thing. All knobs should be turned to the
Sometimes you
max.
don't want to
So
crank the
maybe
knob as far as it'll go.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes the ideal spot is not all the way to 11.
Exactly. And so there's the tempo knob. So that's something we could adjust. So we could go high tempo, we could go low tempo. That's something. Usually as a beginner, you always click high, but that's not always the right thing to do. But anyway, what other knobs are there?
Right.
The other knob might be, here's another one. This one might be more of a switch, but it might be like major key or minor key, like happy or sad,
Mm.
right? That's another
Mhm.
one that you could choose. Another one would be what kind of tune you're going to play.
I feel like busyness. Maybe
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a better
yeah.
word
Complexity.
for this, but
Complexity is a perfect one.
yeah,
So like complexity. So it's tempting, as if you're not a mature artiste, it's tempting to always go high
who's
complexity, isn't it?
like the mature artists have already spent a lot of time fiddling with a lot of knobs, and so they get a feel for like where the ideal spots are.
When you're a kid, you
And so
always want the
maybe
complexity, don't you? But
you want to crank it all the way
yeah,
up. Yeah.
you always want the complexity. But sometimes if you crank up the complexity knob, the power of the laser beam takes a huge dive, right? Like complexity isn't actually what the audience enjoys necessarily. Sometimes, but not
Yeah.
always,
Yeah.
right?
And so and maybe even if sometimes only for a moment, and you need to be ready to turn that back down pretty quick.
Right. Exactly. And so you can think about balancing the configuration of the knobs like at all the different times. Here's another one that reminds me of. And remember, you're allowed to use whatever knobs that you want when constructing, but here's another one. How about old versus new? Like well known.
Tell me about that.
How about like traditional versus modern? That's another one,
I see.
right? So modern is really cool, but it's not necessarily the right decision, right? We want to balance our output with a more traditional. We want to turn the knob more towards traditional, and suddenly you're going to find that the laser beam is far stronger.
Maybe this is a completely unhelpful thing, but I just had a lot of fun in my head. I went from thinking of the knob that has traditional on one side and new on the other side, and that you're making a selection between the two. What if it's two knobs, one of which just increases or decreases the traditionality, and the other one, the modernity? Because you could maybe have a new tune that's in a very traditional style, or you could take something very traditional and inject it with some modern elements.
Yes. I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
The more I think about this, the more I'm imagining like there are a lot of knobs. You're right. There are.
Well, and you can add more. Like you could add more or take some away depending on what you want. One of the things that I've sort of discovered over the years is nostalgia is a super powerful knob, right? So like the more nostalgia you can sneak into a medley, the more successful you tend to be. By the way, this isn't a rule. Like maybe if you turn it too much, your laser beam peters right out. I don't want to talk too much more about petering in the knob episode.
We are waist deep already in this knob discussion, Andrew. I don't think you need to start being cautious about anything.
Fair enough. So maybe there's such a thing as too much nostalgia, or there might be a point where that's no longer an effective laser beam strategy. But I find if you can use nostalgia, which by the way is pretty close to traditional, but if you can make your audience feel that nostalgia, right? If you can work a classic tune into the mix, boy, that does seem to help your odds.
Do you think, Andrew, that is something that has always been true and will always be true? Or do you think that we might be in a pocket of time where nostalgia is effective and we might collectively move to a pocket of time where it's no longer effective?
There's no doubt we're in a pocket of time where that's effective, right? Like when
in general, right? There's a lot of movies.
Yeah, like remakes and all that stuff. We're in like the super postmodern remake phase of culture, aren't we? I mean, like American Idol is the most ridiculous, disappointing thing ever, but I can't stop watching it, or The Voice or whatever. Like it's basically young people that come on television and do their best to copy other people's stuff. And we rank them on how best they copy them. I suppose sometimes there's some variation and they bring their own style to the mix, but it's like, why don't we want to listen to the original songs?
Yeah.
It's weird. Like Clay Aiken from American Idol back in the day, the best, loved Clay. But I just loved his versions of Simon and Garfunkel songs. I couldn't name a single original by Clay or Rubin.
Interesting.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that joke has probably been played out in a few different, like, cartoons and stuff like that, where like a band gets up and they do all the hits, all the covers, right? And then like, and now we're gonna do an original, and everybody's like, ooh.
Yeah, why don't we want to hear that? And it's like, I don't know. It's weird, but so I don't know if it's ever going to be over, Jim, but we're definitely in a pretty interesting phase, not just in the pipe band world, but I think as a culture, right?
That is interesting. Now, one thing that I do think is surprising, Andrew, when we're talking about knobs, is that like the first knob I think anybody would think of, like if you're like, oh, there's a knob on that, especially when it has to do with music, you're going to go like, oh, volume.
Oh, volume is another knob.
Obviously.
Yeah. Dynamics is another knob.
How do we handle that with bagpipes?
Well,
like what does that look like for bagpipes?
Well, for bagpipes, that's much harder. But like if you think about your pipe band, right? Your drummers can provide dynamics. It's funny you should mention that because I heard a band playing with incredible dynamics. It was in a grade 5 competition. Incredible dynamics. Like, wow, what dynamics? But it ended up being way too much. And the dynamics drew so much attention away from the other elements of the performance that it ended up severely reducing the power of the laser. You follow me?
Yeah.
It was like too much. Another knob that you could turn from an ensemble perspective might be how much the drum scores track the bagpipe melody. That would be another one. So a lot of times you want the drum score to fit the melody. So that's a knob you could turn. But if you do that too much, it's super boring and uninteresting. And sometimes the drummers have to like do their own thing where it doesn't necessarily strictly correlate to the shape of the melody. Here's another knob you can turn, the harmony knob.
Oh, I've turned that one way too high several times in my life.
It's really
yes.
easy to turn it too high. It's definitely possible to have it too low. You have to find the right configuration of that so it's just right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other knobs. I feel like you could keep going with it. You can cope with, like another one would be dissonance versus consonance. Right? How many of those cool appoggiaturas are you going to stick in? It's like one or two that produces that sort of beautiful ugliness, right? Ugliness can
but
be,
if it's too many of them, you should.
Yeah. It's like that dissonance can be beautiful, but if you're using it in the middle of every single part for the entire medley or something like that, you've turned the knob too far. Another one would be like, how far are we going to push the envelope? Right? So like how far do we want to push people? And like, do we want to push the envelope all the way to the max? Or do we want to, keep it simple? So just your overall approach, simple versus complex.
I feel like that we might even start thinking about which knobs we can twist when it comes to like stuff that's not public facing as it were, right? Like culture in your band, like how much do you want the intensity and work versus the fun and frivolity?
Yes. That's so like knob theory can apply to stuff that's not just musical. Yeah, it makes total sense. Parenting.
Yeah, probably parenting for sure.
Parenting for sure.
Would you rather be feared or loved? Both. I want them to be afraid of how much they love me. Michael Scott. I think that was in the very first episode of The Office, and it's
a great line.
The line that sticks in my head.
Yeah, I think they dropped that line too early, though. They turned that knob too soon. You know what I mean? A pilot is such a difficult thing for a show, isn't it?
It's true. Isn't it funny to go back and watch the pilots after you know the cast and the storyline and stuff like that?
And you're like, man, they turned that knob too soon. Because that line is so great, but we didn't know Michael Scott yet. We weren't really familiar with the vibe. So it didn't land.
It lands great on your third or fourth viewing.
Yep.
But you have to know, You
know what I mean? So it's like they turned, they missed slightly with the laser intensity. Well, that's always the problem with a pilot. You don't have your laser settings right because, you just don't have enough experience yet. You're just testing the waters to see what's possible. And that line was genius, but it didn't land because of the context. By the way, pipe bands are the same way, right? I feel like a band in grade 1 trying to pull off a chanter stop is a lot different than a band in grade 3 trying to pull off a chanter stop, right? Like how far do you want to push the envelope? You have to take into consideration the context. Like the laser beam analogy, if we're trying to blow up something nearby, the laser settings would be different than if we're trying to blow up something far away, right? So the knobs are going to change depending on the context. If your audience is judges, you want to set your laser beams different than if your audience is a crowd of 2,000 blue hairs. You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. I'm trying to think which
for example,
like tune selections are going to be more preferable for.
I'm not going to play Skyboat Song, aka the Outlander theme, for a judge usually, but I'm definitely playing it for the blue hairs.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know your audience.
Yeah, exactly.
It does make me think of my childhood experiences playing with magnifying glasses too. Which is maybe just playing with the same idea, but just
You're
like
trying to focus the laser beam.
Sometimes and the thing is like sometimes what I really wanted to do was just darken a surface, and so I actually didn't want it to be highly focused. So I had an idea of exactly where I wanted it to be, and I was going for that. It wasn't always maximum intensity to start the fire as quickly as possible.
Interesting. Sometimes you just wanted to torture the ants, and you didn't want to.
I never did ants. Never.
Me either.
No.
I never did the magnifying glass thing.
I spent a lot of hours with magnifying glass though. I tried to do art on wood with it, and I did ruin a lot of my sister's Barbies. I was mean with them, that's for sure.
That's just the way it has to be.
Yeah. Leaf art as well. I really liked trying to get images onto leaves. I thought that was really cool. And sometimes too much intensity actually would like burn straight through, and that was a problem. Right. It's not what
I love
you wanted.
Our analogy is actually kind of holding up a little bit. Yeah, we're trying to focus that laser beam. And we've got a lot of different potential knobs that we can use. Like you can get granular. So here's another one I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of harmonies, and I'm thinking of there's like a counterpoint on one end, and then there's those long sustained harmony notes on the other end, the pedal tones.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So like, do we want to go with pedal tones at the end of Clumsy Lover? Or do we want to go with wild and crazy counterpoint? Or is there something kind of in between that we could use?
So it's not even just like, am I using this knob to turn on, yes, I'm doing harmony versus no, I'm not doing harmony. Then within that, it's like, well, I've got a lot of options for which types of harmony to do.
For sure.
So the knobs multiply.
Yeah. Here's another one.
Or there are sub knobs.
Here's another knob that's really relevant, especially to bands not at the absolute highest level. Simplified settings versus full embellishment. That's another knob.
Oh,
right?
sure.
So if we could turn the knob all the way, well, I've done this before. We just turn the knob all the way off. No embellishments. I don't know if I've told the story before, but one year I had a very green group that we were taking out in grade 5, and it became apparent that like we needed to dial some things back. So I made one executive decision, which is we're not going to play any embellishments in the entire set. That made it a lot easier, right? We didn't have to worry about embellishments. We could worry about the other stuff. By the way, another decision we made is, with the exception of the pipe major, who was slightly more advanced, 1 drone each. That's how we went out in grade 5 that year. And what's really funny about that is we won every contest. Just kidding. We didn't. We did not win every contest, but we took a prize. We took a prize every time out, which was, I thought, really interesting.
Probably a very positive experience for those young kids to have taken a prize.
Hopefully. But that, and in that case, we decided to turn the knob all the way down. But some bands try and turn the knob all the way up, which reminds me of like the difficulty versus easy knob as well. Where do we want to turn that knob? What's the best? I don't know. Good question. Good job, Andrew.
Yeah.
Way to come up with that. Really excellent question.
You know, just in case there was any kind of insight from it, I was just looking for the etymology of the word knob. And I was just curious in it. And there's the internet gave me a list of definitions, of course.
Okay, let's hear it.
You know, there's the rounded lump or ball, especially at the end of a surface or something like that. There's a small lump of a substance. In North America, a prominent round hill.
Yep. Knobby hill. Sure.
Here's a really rare one. It's a small flock of widgeon, pochard, or teal. These are all ducks. Oh, and then there's this one, vulgar slang British, but it's hidden behind a drop down. So I don't know if I.
You got to pay extra for that.
Well, I guess that's all the possible definitions of the word knob.
Is one of the definitions not like something on a console that you turn? That's what I'm thinking.
Oh yeah, it is. Sorry, I skipped over that one. Yeah, it's right at the top.
Say?
A round button for adjusting or controlling a machine.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
The example is, she fiddled with the knobs on the radio.
That's what I was thinking about. Why? What were you thinking about?
I was thinking of this one here, a small lump of substance. The example being, add a knob of butter. So I was thinking, you know, like you take a scoop and add a little knob here, add a little knob there. Take a knob away. That was too much.
I just feel like there's been this undertone running through this entire conversation. I don't really understand it. I'm talking about how to make great music here, Jim.
And the takeaway here is like, when you boil it down, it's all knobs.
Yeah. By the way, in bagpipe performance strategy, we could talk about some knobs there too, like long warm up versus short warm up. We got to find the right. We got to find the right place for that knob. And by the way, it's not always like the context matters. It depends how far away the ants you're trying to torch are. Right? It's like if I'm playing a funeral, my warm up is actually very strategically extremely limited. Meanwhile, if I'm playing a Pibroch competition in ideal conditions, I might go for a long warm up. And then if I'm playing at the Worlds, man, you have to dial it in just right, don't you? And it all depends on the weather, and things could change.
This does make me think too that like a lot of other things, and this isn't unique to bagpipes, but I feel like getting comfortable with the idea that it's all about constant adjustment is strongly related to getting comfortable with the idea that you're never going to reach a point where you say, there, I'm done, I've mastered bagpipes.
There's too many variables. It's kind of like an airline, right? Like, it's never gonna just run correctly. It's a complex system.
Yeah.
There's always inputs. There's always going to be weather. There's always going to be, you know, it's always going to take longer for mechanical checks. There's always going to be a pilot that's sick and can't make their shift, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
There's always going to be some sort of jam at some airport somewhere, et cetera, et cetera. So the system has to be able to adapt to all those potential situations.
So it seems like an important element to like being able to find joy in playing bagpipes and like enjoy your piping, as Gary West might say, is to settle into, accept, and even embrace that it's a process.
Yes.
And it's a forever process. You're always going to be adjusting things. And that's what's fun about
it. You're always making adjustments. And so it's not about learning to do a bunch of things, right? It's
Mm,
about developing, it's about developing a rich set of knobs. You know what I
yes.
mean? So like
I hope this will be the next Piper's Dojo t-shirt. Dojo You. It's about developing a rich set
it
of
really is
knobs.
though. Okay. So like developing a rich set of knobs. When you're a beginner, you start with just a couple knobs. But you can see as we learn the bagpipes, we're expanding these outward. But then maybe somewhere
Yeah.
along the way, it's like, oh, what about learning to write harmonies? And then if you could do that, suddenly that adds another like extremely cool tool in your toolkit. What about playing some pibroch? That becomes a tool. Knowledge of that becomes a tool in your toolkit.
Mm.
Learning some new embellishments becomes a tool. Learning to simplify tunes becomes a tool. Immersing yourself long enough to understand what tunes really resonate with people and give them that nostalgia
Mm.
type feeling. Like that is a secret weapon that you can use in the toolkit as well. Being tied into pop culture can be a tool in your toolkit. Like the year
Mm.
that Shots played a little bit of Coldplay, that was so cool. And then we're talking about drum corps. They have their whole unique set of knobs.
That's a whole nother set.
It's a
Yeah.
whole nother set, right? And then if the midsection is good, that could be a whole other set. And by the way, aesthetics is a potential tool in the toolkit. So it might even pay to have a great drum major that knows how to get
Mm.
the band looking good and so on and so forth. There's all these tools. And then when we're learning pipe band craft, it's not about like putting a medley together. No, it's about developing as many possible tools in the toolkit and then exploring different knob configurations, for lack of a better term. Exploring different knob
Mhm.
configurations that produce the best quality laser beam.
It's fun too that like you probably will never hit a point where you're like, there, I've adjusted all the knobs and I'm going to step away and now
Never
it's
going to
perfect.
work.
You're just always going to be
That's right.
there. Just always going to
Like,
be
because
there.
the weather's going to change, right? So on a
Yeah.
cold night, your laser beam needs a different configuration than on a hot, humid night. And sometimes clouds are going to come over. Sometimes it's going to be snowing. Sometimes the moon is going to be further away from the earth. So in order to blow it up, you need a different configuration,
Right. Yeah.
right? You following me?
Yeah.
It's a
Following. Yeah.
complex system. It's like when you fly on an airplane or even a train or even when you drive a car, right? How much time does it take you to get to
Mm.
grandma's house? Well, that all depends. It takes 15
Mm.
minutes unless there's an accident or if it's rush hour or if it's raining or maybe it'll be snowing. And what's so cool about a car is it gives you all the knobs you need to successfully navigate any situation. That's what makes it
Mm.
such an amazing technology.
Yeah.
Because it's got all the knobs fully developed, time
Yeah.
tested,
Mm.
corrected for many, many, many errors, and still correcting.
There's something new coming out all the time. Yeah.
Like the ability for the car to drive itself during rush hour is going to be incredible.
That's a pretty big additional knob.
Big, big one. Can't wait. My Toyota Camry doesn't do that yet. Yeah. Anything else? Anything else you want to talk about regarding the knobs?
I'm I'm thinking about more knobs is all that's going on now. I'm just thinking how many very many knobs there are. It's like every knob you think of really then subdivides into another 6 knobs, you
Well,
know?
another thing you could look at is a performance or a performer that you love and idolize,
Mm.
and think about that performer in terms of their knobs. You're trying not to laugh, and I delivered that way on purpose. But like, think about that person's knobs, okay? think about the knobs they have that you don't, and then work
Yeah,
to
and how
develop
can
that.
how could you start developing those
Exactly. How can
knobs?
you start
Yeah.
to develop similar knobs? Deep.
I get that feeling for sure. Like I've never put these words to it, you
Well,
know.
who
But like when
has?
you're in the presence of somebody who plays really well, I've definitely got the impression like, wow, they just like it's not just that they do the things that I'm doing better than I do them. They have access to things
Yeah.
that that aren't even in my like realm of
Yes,
awareness. They just have way more
for sure.
knobs.
Way more. Yes, exactly. Just one thing that comes to mind when you say that. It's like the moisture control canister systems, right?
Mm.
That's a great example of that's a knob and most people don't realize it, right?
Mm.
So that knob is the moisture control knob. Okay. Now, the more moisture control systems you add, the less good your sound gets, right? And then the more natural your setup is with your sheepskin and like throw out the water trap, then you can get a far richer sound. But The moisture control system lasts a lot longer, right? And the other one is much more difficult, from an environmental standpoint. But that's a knob that people turn. So the big top solo competitor players, they've got the knob cranked up on the moisture control thing, and they're using their extreme skills in other areas to make up for the fact that it's much harder to get a rich sound with the moisture control system. But their pipes last a lot longer. So those knobs are like perfectly controlled. Most people at first glance think to themselves, oh, moisture control system, good, want that. But it's more than that. It's a knob.
They think of it as a switch, an on or off, but it's
a knob. That's exactly right. And then you find your right balance. For example, grade 1 pipe bands, they turn the knob most of the way the other way. They want that natural, rich setup. They got the cane drone reeds in there. They got no moisture control systems. However, most still keep the water trap tube in there for a little bit. So their knob isn't all the way cranked to the natural side. There's still a little bit left, but it's way more that way. And then most solo players are way more that way. But it's one of these, and each individual player will tweak that configuration based on other things. That's a knob that can be developed rather than just a yes/no answer, to your point, Jim. Yeah, that comes to mind too. It's really kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I wonder if that figures into this analogy too. I wonder how often, as we're learning, as we're going along our trajectory of improving our piping, how many times a thing comes into our awareness as a switch, it's on or off, and then we develop that switch. It becomes a knob as we get better.
That just reminds me of a general political discourse. When you start off with your political opinions, like when you're a teenager, you're like,
oh, the world is very black and white when you're young. That's for sure.
Republicans bad, capitalism bad, communism bad, right? We go through all these things, right? And then at the end of the day, it's all quite nuanced, isn't it? And I feel like an intelligent person will understand the knobs at play, right? And be able to like think about them in that sense as like changeable, configurable concepts that helps you get to a more like developed sense of the world.
What I hear you saying, Andrew, is intelligent people think about
intelligent
knobs.
People always thinking about knobs.
Yeah,
absolutely. You know what I'm saying though? When you start off, to your point, it's like, oh, moisture control system, good. Complex harmonies, good. Modern tunes, way better than traditional tunes, right? Like
high tempo,
good. Fast, good. Full embellishments, yes. And then it's much more nuanced than that. These are all things that exist on a continuum, and we want to configure all those things in our best interest, which ebb and flow like constantly all the time. Practice versus performance. That's another knob. At any given time, am I practicing and experimenting, or am I refining and attempting to deliver something polished? That's another one. Like, and by the way, even on the competition field, I think there are some bands that treat competition like as much like just a experimental practice session as like, it'll be really close to that. And then there'll be other bands who are obsessed with perfection and polish. And then there'll be other bands who are somewhere in between, just in how they think about and approach their performances.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like I've seen both and things in between, and it's not like any one of them is like, well, that's obviously the best way for everybody to do it.
Like, what's better, Dave Matthews Band, like jam band, style where a ton of stuff is open-ended and up in the air? What's better, that or when you go see, I don't know what?
Trans-Siberian Orchestra is what comes to my mind. I don't know if anybody's seen shows like that before, but it's like
click track.
Every single detail is laid out ahead of time. It's going to be the same in every city that they stop
and
to
which
play.
one's better?
Right, like you can't. They're just two
Dave
different
Matthews
things.
Band
That's
is better.
Do it.
Okay, but like Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
The Trans-Siberian
really cool.
Orchestra fan base is rising up in anger now.
But it's still very cool. Yeah. It still can be very cool.
Yeah.
Pipe bands don't seem like they're like that, but they are. Like there's some bands that play loose and exciting and take big risks, and then there's some bands that do the opposite. And by the way, it's not necessarily that one is better than the other. It's just they've dialed their knobs to try to make their laser beam as effective as possible.
So it's all knobs, but no two people, no two bands are going to have the same configuration at any moment in time.
It's possible that they would, but I think extremely unlikely because there are so many possible things. Yeah. I don't know. Let's leave it there, Jim. I'll leave you and the listeners. I'll set you free to think about knobs.
Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us if you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that. Your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.